Welcome back to Summer Edition. I'm Hilmi Naji. In 2 more days, we bid adieu to 2014. A momentous year that has had its ups and downs, with catastrophes rocking far-flung nations and some slightly closer to home, which Malaysia is still coming to grips with. But before we close the book on this roller coaster of a year, we thought it would be fitting to run through the biggest news stories from around the world. On September 11, 2001, Islamic extremism took center stage. 13 years later, it dominated the news again, but 2014 saw a different tactical approach, with social media being used as a strategic tool. Islamic State gained significant attention this year after the extremist group took over large swaths of Syria and Iraq, declaring a worldwide caliphate in June. The fighters have showcased social media resilience, using the internet as propaganda, recruiting new members worldwide, even in Malaysia. There have also been videos uploaded online of alleged IS beheadings.
Save me some dignity and don't accept any meager compensation for my death from the same people who effectively hit the last nail in my coffin.
And despite ongoing US-led airstrikes on IS targets in Syria and Iraq, the group's power has failed to wane. On December 15th, as residents in Sydney were beginning their work day, a hostage standoff began to unfold in central Sydney. Iranian-born Manhar Monis held 17 hostage at a Lindt chocolate cafe. The standoff ended 16 hours later when police stormed the building. 2 hostages were killed: senior lawyer and mom of 3, Katrina Dawson, and restaurant manager Tori Johnson. Monis was also among the fatalities. On December 16th, 7 members of Pakistan's Taliban dressed in paramilitary uniforms opened fire on a military-run school in the city of Peshawar, killing 145, including 132 school children. The attack, the deadliest to ever hit the country, was in retaliation for the Pakistan Army's ongoing operation against the Taliban. Over 50 sons of important army officers were killed in the massacre. And finally, in Nigeria, Islamist group Boko Haram wreaked terror this year, killing over 2,000 and forcing thousands more to leave. In April, more than 200 schoolgirls were kidnapped. Their fate is still unknown. Continuing what appears to be a never-ending sequence of strife in the Middle East, violence erupted in Gaza in July when Israel launched a military operation called Operation Protective Edge, pummeling the strip with airstrikes and attacks on ground. The 7-week-long conflict, the latest in the decades-long war between Israel and Palestinians, was sparked by the brutal killing of 16-year-old Mohammed Abu Qadir, which was in revenge for the murder of 3 Jewish teens abducted in the West Bank. The Israeli bombardment, which aimed to stop rocket fire from Gaza into Israel, saw over 2,200 Palestinians killed, mostly civilians, including hundreds of children. A stark contrast, Israel's death toll stood at 64 soldiers and 3 civilians. In August, a long-term ceasefire was agreed upon, but until today, Gazans are slowly trying to pick up the pieces of their lives, with billions needed to rebuild the tens of thousands of homes destroyed in the conflict. Now, the world also saw several major protests break out. In Ukraine, the country was hit by anti-government protesters calling for the ouster of President Viktor Yanukovych. The political crisis reached a turning point in late February, when after months of rallies, a gunfight broke out between protesters and security forces, killing 100. A few days later, Yanukovych was ousted after a parliament vote and interim government installed. This could have been the end of the upheaval, but in Crimea, where the majority of the population is ethnic Russian, another crisis was brewing. After weeks of pro-Russian and anti-government protests, pro-Russian forces began swiftly occupying strategic positions in Crimea. Then, a referendum saw 96.7% vote in favor of leaving Ukraine and being annexed by Russia. Consequently, in May, the eastern areas of Donetsk and Luhansk voted in favor of independence from Ukraine. Protests there soon escalated into an armed separatist insurgency, leading to the Ukraine's government launching a military counter-offensive. In what is now the ongoing war in Donbass, the conflict has claimed 4,700 lives. Political instability in Thailand began in 2013 and spilled over to this year, with massive anti-government protests calling for the resignation of Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra. As rallies were hit with more violence and chaos in late January, Yingluck's government declared a state of emergency. Snap polls were called for in February, but the opposition boycotted the polls, declaring them as unconstitutional. An interesting turn of events, the PM was removed from office in May when a constitutional court dismissed her for abuse of power. Right after that, Yingluck was indicted over a corrupt and controversial rice subsidy scheme, which incurred losses amounting to a whopping 16 billion US dollars. In late May, the Thai army declared a martial law and launched a coup d'etat, after which a vote made General Prayut Chan-o-cha the new leader. Hong Kong made headlines in September when tens of thousands of pro-democracy protesters began camping out in three key spots: Mongkok, Admiralty, and Causeway Bay. Citizens were demanding genuine elections for the city's chief executive, which would mean they would be allowed to elect their leader in 2017 from an open list of candidates. This after China ruled that only candidates approved by a nominating committee will be allowed to run. In the peak of the protests, the number of demonstrators would swell to over 100,000, with cops firing not only tear gas but abusing protesters. Until this date, over 1,000 have been nabbed for involvement in the rallies. Racial tensions were ignited in America after the fatal shooting of Michael Brown on August 9th in Ferguson, Missouri. Just a day after the killing of the unarmed 18-year-old black man by Darren Wilson, a white police officer, an ongoing series of protests and civil disorder broke out. For weeks after the shooting, protesters clashed with cops. Violence escalated again after a grand jury voted not to indict Wilson on November 24th. He has since resigned from the Ferguson Police Department, citing safety concerns for his family and fellow officers. July 17th, another black man, Eric Garner, died on New York Staten Island after a police officer put him in a chokehold, which is in a violation of NYPD policy. Cops had moved in to arrest the 43-year-old for allegedly selling loose cigarettes. A grand jury later chose not to indict Daniel Pantaleo, the 29-year-old cop who put Garner in a chokehold. On December 24th, cops scuffled with protesters after another white police officer shot dead a black teenager just a few miles from Ferguson in Berkeley. But the difference between this case and the Brown shooting was that surveillance footage showed that 18-year-old Antonia Martin pointed a gun at the cop, who fired multiple shots out of fear for his own life. US police had been on high alert since two New York cops were gunned down in an ambush last weekend by a man who made a threatening post online about killing police. He later killed himself. In December 2013, a 2-year-old boy died in Guinea. At that time, health officials and the world had no idea what was coming. Little did they know the death of the toddler Emil Owamono would lead to the largest Ebola outbreak in history. The child is believed to be the first Ebola case of the current virus disease epidemic, which has infected almost 20,000 people. The World Health Organization first reported about Guinea's Ebola outbreak in March. The highly contagious disease, spread by coming in contact with infected bodily fluids, quickly moved to Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Mali. To date, Ebola outbreak has killed almost 7,700 people. Now, apart from the double Malaysia Airlines tragedies this year, international headlines were also bombarded with several other transportation mishaps. On April 16th, a South Korean ferry called the MV Seoul capsized and killed over 300 people on board, mostly secondary students from Danwon High School. The ferry was en route from Incheon to Jeju when a sudden 145 degrees sharp turn caused the ferry to capsize. The captain, 68-year-old Lee Jun-seok, received 36 years jail on November 11th for neglecting responsibility to rescue passengers. Meanwhile, on another plane crash, a Taiwan passenger plane crashed in Taiwan's Penghu archipelago amid stormy weather in the area. The ATR-72 TransAsia Airways plane, which was carrying 58 people, crashed into buildings after a failed attempt to land at Magong Airport, killed 48 passengers and crew members. On May 13th, an explosion at a coal mine in Soma, Manisa, Turkey, caused an underground mine fire, which burned for 2 days, killing a little over 300 people. An electrical fault triggered the blast, which is likely to be the country's deadliest ever mining accident. From accidents to Mother Nature. On December 12, a village in Indonesia's Banjarnegara district, Central Java, was struck with a landslide set off by heavy rains and buried dozens of houses in Jomblung village, killing 18 people and left 19 missing. According to a national disaster spokesperson, about 105 houses were kept. According to a national disaster spokesperson, about 105 houses were swept away. In July, a powerful tropical cyclone called Typhoon Ramasun battered Vietnam, Philippines, and southern China. China counted 33 dead from the strongest storm to strike its south in 4 decades. The deadly cyclone killed 11 in northern Vietnam, and the most casualties suffered was in the Philippines, where Typhoon Ramasun wreaked havoc, killing 94. Just yesterday, an Italian-flagged ferry chartered by Greek ferry operator Anek Lines, carrying 478 passengers and crew and more than 200 vehicles, caught fire in the Adriatic Sea. According to officials, at least one person was killed after jumping ship and 2 others have been injured. All day and night, passengers huddled on the vessel's upper decks, pelted by rain and hail and struggling to breathe through the thick smoke. As of today, rescue teams have managed to evacuate 329 people, leaving another 149 still on board. And that wraps up our 2014 year-end report for World News. Stay tuned for tomorrow for more year-end recaps. It's back to you, Natasha.